For this final video in the presentation, we're going to cover the equipment, jobs, and processes that go into making those products we talked about. The first workstation is the debarker. At the debarker, hardwood saw logs are loaded onto an infeed deck that conveys those logs to the debarker operator. The debarker operator is an entry to mid-level position in the sawmill, and this is an example of the controls that they have at their workstation. The point of the debarker is to remove the bark as well as rocks and mud from the outside of the log, so when the log is sawed inside the mill, the saw stays sharp. There are two types of debarkers, ring and rosser head debarkers. With ring debarkers, there are knife arms that spin in place, right here, that peel the bark off the outside of the log while the log is being conveyed through that ring. You can kind of think of it like sharpening a pencil. With a rosser head debarker, instead of the log being conveyed through a ring, the log is spun in place while a grinder head will move down along the length of the log and grind off the bark. You can kind of think of that like eating corn on the cob. So once the log has been debarked, it's then passed along to our next workstation in the mill. If you click on these blue links, if you have access to the PowerPoint, you can click on those links and see a short video clip of each of these different pieces of equipment in action. The second stop along the path of the log is the head saw. There are two types of head saws we will talk about, circular and band head saws. For both types, the debarked log is first loaded onto a carriage and positioned carefully. Once it is in the correct alignment, the head sawyer will clamp it to the carriage and then begin to saw. Here's the picture of a circular head saw blade. It's very similar to a table saw blade, and the teeth along the outside can be sharpened, or if they're heavily damaged, they're interchangeable and can be replaced. Here's a picture of a band head saw. Just like a shop band saw you might have seen before, the blade is a ring of steel that is then taken off the saw to be resharpened. The head saw is one of the most advanced pieces of equipment, and the position, the head sawyer, is also one of the most advanced jobs in the sawmill. You can see the controls on the right here. There is two joysticks as well as foot controls and other computer setworks that assist the sawyer in processing the log. You can think of it like a high-tech video game on steroids that comes with a potentially $1 million plus price tag. The first cut on the log produces the slab, which is then sent to the chipper. The next cut in produces what's called a flitch. A flitch is almost like a board in that it has two flat faces on the top and bottom, but the edges still need to be processed, and so it's sent to the edger. Once the slab and maybe a flitch or two have been removed from each face of the log, we now have what's called a cant. A cant has four flat faces and is then passed along to the next workstation. After the head saw, cants are sent to workstation number 3, the resaw. Both line bar and horizontal resaws are used throughout the industry. Here's a picture of a line bar resaw. The saw blade runs vertically, and this whole saw head is fixed in one position. The sawyer will move this fence in and out to adjust the depth of cut and thus board thickness. Here's a picture of the controls that the sawyer uses at their workstation. They have both hand and feet controls to assist them throughout the process. This is a picture of a horizontal resaw. It's similar to the line bar, but the saw blade runs horizontally, like the name says, instead of vertically. The other difference is that instead of a fence to change the depth of cut or board thickness, this whole saw head can be raised and lowered based on what board thickness you want to saw. The whole point of a resaw is to saw boards as quickly as possible. The sawyer's job is to feed cants into the saw as close to end as possible. That way the saw is always cutting and producing lumber. On the back side, once the cants have been fed through the saw, the board is separated from the cant, and then the cant will return on what's called the runaround. This is kind of like a carousel, and it brings the cant back to the front of the saw to be resawn. Here's a picture of the outfeed of the resaw. As you can see, the board gets separated while the cant continues down to the runaround. That cant will be continued to be sawn until it reaches a finished size. For instance, like a railroad tie or a pallet cant, at which point it's a finished cant and will be passed along through the next workstation. The other position at the resaw is the turner. The turner's job is to turn the cant and pick the best face to be sawn, and then they stage those cants for the sawyer. The turner and the sawyer work together as a team, and these are both considered mid to advanced level positions in the sawmill. Our next workstation is the edger. There were two examples of edgers, manual and optimized. The main input material for an edger is a flitch that would come from either a headsaw or a resaw workstation. Flitches are not quite boards yet because while they have two flat faces, the edges are still round. This round natural edge comes from the curvature of the log and is called wane. Wane is a defect and must be removed. As such, the purpose of the edger is to cut off the wane from flitches and produce square-edged boards. With a manual edger, the edger operator decides where to cut the wane and aligns saws using laser lines. With an optimized edger, the operator gets a little more help from computerized lasers and scanners that are able to automatically identify exactly where to cut the wane off. Here's what the inside of the edger looks like with the circular saw blades that are adjustable. These blades can slide in and out depending on where the wane needs to be cut off at. The output material coming from the edger is a square-edged board, and the byproduct produced would be the wane edgings that would go to the chipper. The edger operator is an entry to mid-level position in the sawmill. Our fifth workstation in the sawmill is the grading station. This is a critical step in the process because a dollar value is assigned to each board individually. Lumber graders will often walk across the tops of the boards while they inspect the lumber moving on a chain beneath their feet. Some mills may have boards drop individually into a special station, while other mills will grade lumber from the ends of the boards. No matter how this station is set up, it is one of the most important steps for sure. Each time the inspector puts a grade mark, like this one, on a board, they are basically writing a price tag for that board. Lumber graders are one of the most advanced and highest paid positions in the sawmill. Our next workstation is the trim saw. The trimmer operator is an entry-level position, and the purpose of this workstation is to cut boards to length. Inside this piece of equipment is a series of saws evenly spaced. The trimmer operator feeds boards squarely into the saw and then selects what length to cut the board to. With an optimized trimmer, there's a special camera that is able to read trimming instructions that the graders write on the boards and then automatically position and trim the boards to the correct length. The byproduct produced at the trim saw would be end cutoffs or trimmings that are sent to the chipper, and the finished product produced would be square end trim boards, which are then sent to be packaged. After the trim saw, the finished boards are ready to be sorted and packaged. This occurs at the green chain. Lumber moves along a long series of chains, while lumber pilers will sort and stack the boards into different carts based on the grade, length, and thickness of the boards. The job of stacking lumber in carts and banding packs is an entry-level position in the sawmill, but very important. Here's another picture of a green chain, and you can see pallet cans are also sorted and stacked here. Some high production mills might have what's called a bin sorter. Instead of manually stacking the boards into different carts, the lumber automatically falls into different bins. Once the bin is filled, it is then lowered to another set of chains and taken to finish being packaged. And then our final workstation is the chipper. All the different byproducts, whether that's the slabs from the sawmills or edgings and trimmings, are sent to the chipper, and that wood fiber is chipped into standard size and then blown into semi-trailer vans for other businesses to utilize. Sawdust is also separated at this point and then sold to other different companies for different purposes. Whew, that was a lot to take in, but that is the process of turning a log into lumber. Some other important jobs that we didn't get a chance to talk about include maintenance. As we learned, there's a lot of different pieces of equipment in the sawmill, and it takes a top-notch maintenance staff to keep it all running. Saw filer. The job of a saw filer is to sharpen and repair all the different saw blades in the mill. This is a very advanced and high-level position and is often one of the highest paid jobs in the mill. Lift operator. Not only are they loading logs for the debarker and taking away packs of lumber, but they also load and unload different trucks as well. And finally, a log scaler. The job of a log scaler is to measure both the size and the quality of each log that the mill buys. So that covers the equipment, jobs, and processes that go into turning a log into different finished products. Here are some review questions for this final section of the presentation. Go ahead and pause the video, and when you're done, you can submit your answers.